Well, National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batohi, has told Parliament that the Department of Justice was likely to establish an inquiry into political interference in the National Prosecution Authority's efforts to prosecute TRC cases that have been in limbo since 1994. Well, for a deeper insight into this, we speak to Executive Director at Corruption Watch, Karam Singh. Karam, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. Your organization's response to these comments made by the head of the NPA that, in fact, conversations around possibly holding an inquiry of this nature are at an advanced stage.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks very much for having me on the program. The announcement, I suppose, at one level needs to be welcomed, but at another level, this is something which has been coming down the line for a long time. We already had an announcement in November of last year by Minister of Justice Lamola. That was at the memorial, the inaugural Ford Kalata Foundation memorial lecture, that there would be this commission of inquiry. That was in November last year. That followed, various letters and petitions from former TRC commissioners, from victims' families, calling for this inquiry. We know, going back as far as at least 2014, with the affidavit that was submitted by former National Director Vusi Pikoli in the case of Nokuthula Simelane, that there had been the suppression of these cases. So this is information which has been in the public domain for a long time, and the need for an independent, public, open commission of inquiry is something which is absolutely required. And at this point, we haven't even received that kind of a firm commitment from the National Director or the Minister of Justice as to what type of commission of inquiry are they talking about. Are they talking about some kind of a commission that would happen behind closed doors, that would not be open? Or are we talking about a commission of inquiry that would flow from the Commissions Act, similar to the Judicial Commission of Inquiry that we've seen Chief Justice Zondo preside over with relation to state capture?
You're right, Karam, in the sense that not much has been conclusively said around this commission of inquiry. I mean, we haven't heard much in terms of just the terms of reference. I mean, what sort of answers would victims or surviving families of these apartheid-era crimes actually be hoping to gain from an inquiry of this nature? I mean, how important is it for us to sufficiently outline and set out the parameters of an inquiry like this that is looking into something as sensitive as political interference?
No, we absolutely need that level of clarity, and we absolutely need to have a commission which is public, which is open, which is subject to the rules which we have, which we've seen during the Zondo Commission, where people can be compelled to appear before the commission, where there's an opportunity for victims' families to ask questions. This is now goes back to really the dawn of democracy, where we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we had this historical compromise that if you applied for amnesty and you came forward and you made a full disclosure of what happened, that you could receive amnesty. And we know for sure that there were numerous parties who never came forward who applied for amnesty, for whom there's significant evidence of participation in gross violations of human rights. And we know from the Pikoli affidavit that attempts in the mid-O's to pursue these cases were suppressed. Were suppressed by the then Minister of Justice, by other officials at the NPA, and we need to have a clear accounting for why that happened and what are we going to do going forward to ensure that we see justice for the families that suffered under this period, and particularly for those families that bared their soul and came forward before the TRC but have never received any justice.
I want to talk about those practical realities, Karam. I mean, we know that Shamila Batohi says that conversations with the Justice Minister are at an advanced stage concerning the institution of an inquiry of this nature. But I mean, the reality is that this is still an ANC-led government, and so the idea that these are instances that only occurred during the Mbeki era, and the fact that somehow would not, occur during a Ramaphosa era, I don't know if that would be naive in thinking that we're completely devoid. This is still the same political organization and the same interests that possibly suppressed the cases all those years ago could still be in play even today. And so how do we respond to a reality like that?
We just have to continue to petition and to put pressure that justice is done in this case. I mean, if you look at Vusi Pokoli's affidavit, what becomes clear for the reason for the suppression of these cases was the very issue that you flagged, was the concern that this would be a process that would then open the door for prosecutions against senior ANC officials who didn't come before the TRC. So, indeed, we're dealing with the same political organization. We're possibly dealing with the same interests within that organization that doesn't want to see these types of investigations and prosecutions go forward. But this is what's required of the Constitution. It's what was required following the outcomes of the TRC when numerous recommendations were put forth, even recommendations with regard to reparations to victims' families that we never saw carried forth. So, we are sitting with a political reality with a governing party that was the same governing party that whose leadership was involved in suppressing these cases 10, 15 years ago. And that's what we're still fighting against now. It's positive that the National Director of Public Prosecutions goes before Parliament and makes these statements. It's positive that the Minister of Justice has indicated the willingness to pursue a commission of inquiry. We just must make sure now that it's absolutely a commission of inquiry which is independent, which is public, which is open, which is follows the Commission of Inquiry Act, and is not some a backroom, a closed deal that would be really an insult to the victims of apartheid and their families.
Outside of an inquiry of this nature, Karam, when we're looking at the capacity of the NPA to actually prosecute TRC cases. Now, last year, you mentioned that announcement that was made November last year. Last year, the head of the NPA announced that, a 25-strong team would be dedicated to looking into these TRC cases. This week before Parliament, that number was reduced to just 16 prosecutors. We know that budgetary cuts is a reality that has been affecting the capacity of the NPA to do its job, which is to prosecute crimes against the state. And so I wonder how much of a factor this is also likely to play. The fact that, the NPA may not also have capacity to actually follow through with a lot of the commitments or promises they're currently making.
Yes, absolutely. We know that the NPA was hobbled in the era of state capture, that the NPA has been on a mission under the new, not new anymore, NDPP, to reestablish the capacity. We've had this debate often now in terms of the capacity to effectively pursue cases of corruption. These are realities that we have to deal with. But up to this point, the thing that I think that's been most frustrating to the South African Coalition for Transitional Justice, to victims' families, is the general lack of openness from the NPA leadership to engage with transitional justice structures, to engage with families, to understand exactly what their capacity constraints are. We've had independent persons. Advocate Howard Barney's been leading cases relating to the opening of the inquest into Ahmed Timol, into Neil Agate. We now have a movement towards the opening of the inquest into Imam Haroon. These are being pursued by private advocates at the bar. There's lots of will out there to pursue these cases. And if the NPA were to be open with us, much more open with us about the types of capacity challenges that they're facing, then at least through an engagement with appropriate skill within the bar, within the legal fraternity, that assistance could be provided to the NPA to assist in the pursuit of justice in these cases. But up to this point, the NPA hasn't been forthcoming with us about what their capacity challenges are, exactly what investigations have taken place up to this point, and really their readiness to pursue this. So without a real understanding of that from the NPA, then we're really speaking about these issues in the abstract.
And I mean, talking about that pursuit of justice, Karam, I mean, these cases are 28 years, almost 30 years in the making. A lot of the key witnesses, perhaps, may no longer be alive, and so that, of course, jeopardizes the quality of the prosecution that we're likely to see. A lot of these cases may, in fact, not be able to be resuscitated, in a sense, and so a lot of damage has been done. Just talk to us about the importance of persevering, though, with this pursuit, regardless of the challenges that, as I've mentioned, are seemingly mounted up against the prosecuting authority.
Absolutely. I mean, this really goes to the core of our democracy, of our constitutional democracy. It goes to the core of the democratic transition from a brutal, apartheid state that engaged in gross violations of human rights to a democratic society based on the rule of law and based upon sound constitutional principles. So, we've seen historically, if you go back to the Second World War, that there were prosecutions of Nazi guards, of people involved in concentration camps 30, 40 years after the fact. But you're right, time is against us. Key witnesses are no longer with us. The investigations that previously did take place in some cases may have gone stale or have gone cold. So we don't have the luxury of time. But if we're ever going to get to a stage where we are able to reduce this deep-seated trust deficit that exists between citizen and state, if we're going to restore the rule of law and proceed on the basis that there is justice in our system, then certainly these are the types of cases that we need to have closure on, that we need to prioritize where time is against us to restore that dignity, to breathe life into the notion of truth in terms of truth and reconciliation, and to really pursue justice in a way which can close this chapter appropriately and move the country forward. Without that, then we'll never be satisfied that we close the chapter on that history in a way which was restores the dignity of those that suffered under that regime.